With that, we will get started with our next presentation. We have Don Saucier here, who's going to be, he's a University Distinguished Teaching Scholar and Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. He's going to talk to us about creating syllabi that inform and inspire so that we can inspire our students to want to come to class and be excited. And so I'm going to let Don take it away and inspire us.
All right, so is this sharing what I wanted to share, Andy?
It is now sharing in presenter mode.
Now it's sharing, of course it is. Yeah. Let's try that real quick. One of the things about teaching, as many of you probably know, is one of the hardest parts is getting your screens to share correctly. Everything else is pretty much easy in comparison. So we're going to try that again.
It's also about just, improvising on the fly when things go wrong, because that's bound to happen.
All right, let's
Best
see.
laid plans.
Is that working now?
Now it is exactly
Now
what
it is
you showed
working.
me
Excellent.
before. So
So, hi everyone. I'm Don Saucier. Thank you, Andy, for introducing me. I'm hoping that this is going to be the first, the second, maybe the third of many interactions that we will have together, because the TLC does a lot of things over the course of the academic year to help support you in your teaching. One of the things we do, as you can see the slide representing, is we have a TLC professional development series that you're going to hear me talk about all the time. It's Wednesdays starting next Wednesday, not tomorrow, but next Wednesday at noon on Zoom. This is our Zoom link. We also archive our events. So if you say, oh man, I got a meeting, I can't make it then, that's great. We archive the events. We put them up. You can watch them. You can share them with colleagues, all of those things. We also give professional development certificates. And if you're a faculty member, you can potentially be selected as a TLC fellow. So this is something I want to put on your radar. First event, a week from tomorrow. Hope to see you there. Today, though, I'm going to talk to you about creating syllabi that inform and inspire. My colleagues Dave and Trina talked just a bit ago, about an hour ago, about the components that go into a syllabus, wonderful templates, wonderful information to include. And what I want to do is I want to kind of complement and supplement that conversation that they had with you already about how we can take those and make those something that is going to support our objectives to help our students learn. So that's going to be my objective today. So my overarching objectives within that is I want to discuss a philosophy that I use in my teaching, and hopefully you'll use in yours, to dictate engaging and empathetic teaching practices. Something that Andy had kind of mentioned in the conversation we'd had in the previous session is that being empathetic to our students, being supportive of our students is something that we should be doing. That not only is this kind of the moral right thing to do, it's kind of the zeitgeist of teaching right now. It's kind of the spirit of teaching. It's where we've progressed to. I think COVID kind of accelerated that progression, but we were going there anyway. So I think kind of being empathetic and engaging in how we set up our instructional materials is going to be something we should aspire to do. And these teaching practices, being engaging and empathetic, is going to support student learning and success. I say this often. If you heard me at New Faculty Orientation yesterday, I said it there too. If your teaching philosophy is not grounded in the mission to support student learning and success, then teaching might not be your thing. Because when we teach, we are supporting our students' development, we're supporting their success. We're not doing it for them, but we're putting ourselves in positions to support what they do so they can do it well. And it's going to make our own teaching experiences more positive and fulfilling when we do that. So I think there's an immediate payoff. When we are engaging and empathetic to our students, better for them and better for us. I'm one of those people who loves my job. I love what I do. I think we should get to do this. And I think this is one of the ways that helps me do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to infuse that into a buy. So I want you to think for a second. I want to actually collect the responses because I want to keep my comments relatively brief to give us opportunity to kind of talk and process if we need to. But I want you to think about the single word. If you had to come up with one word that you would want your students to use to describe you after your first class, what would that word be? And then what single word would you want your students to use to describe your class after your first class? Because when I go into classes, I have an intention. I have a perception that I want to instill in my students about me as the instructor and about what my course is going to do. And then my behavior leads hopefully to that outcome. I think sometimes people say, well, I want my students to know that I'm passionate. Well, then you have to demonstrate your passion. You say, I want my students to think, that I care. Then you have to demonstrate that you care. So I want you to think about, what do you want them to leave with And then you structure your syllabus and your first day activities to achieve that description. I want us to be intentional and backward designing that perception. So the foundation that I'm going to share with you, and again, if you were at New Faculty Orientation, you heard me talk about this briefly. If you've pretty much ever seen me talk in the last 3 years, you've heard about this before, and I'm going to talk about it again this year at a lot of the talks that you might see me do. I think that piece should be the foundation for our teaching philosophies. I think that this is going to be the foundation for teaching excellence. I think this is going to be the foundation for helping our students learn and helping them succeed. And I love the idea about bringing peace, inclusion, warmth, welcoming, comfort, safety to the classroom. But it's also an acronym because I think there are 5 components that create excellent teaching. First of these is preparation. You got to have a plan. Second of these is expertise. We got to know our stuff. The third of these is authenticity. We have to be actual human people, not brilliant robots that our students can relate to. Go right to us, not to the brilliant robots. And then we're going to care. And we're going to tell them that we care. And we're going to do so genuinely. All of this has to be authentic, coming back to that third point. And we're going to care about our students. We're going to care about their learning. And we're going to care about the process of teaching. And then we're going to be engaged. A big component of my teaching philosophy is what I call trickle-down engagement. Our engagement can actually inspire our students to be engaged, and then will actually inspire them to learn. We have data on this. We've published on this. It's something where if they see us as engaged ourselves, they will be engaged themselves, and they will learn better. So what we want to do is we want to bring peace to everything we do in our class. And we're going to infuse this into everything. We're going to infuse this into course policies. We're going to infuse this into our course schedule and structure. We're going to infuse this into our assignments and our assessments, and infuse this into our interactions with our students. And if you want to hear me talk more about all of those, I have opportunities to do that in our PD series, because today I'm going to focus a little bit more how to put this in our syllabus. So today we're going to talk about how we can bring peace to our syllabus. Our first cat setting of the morning with Ashley's cat. Very nice. All right. So I'm going to talk about 10 practical ways, because for me, when I go to teaching workshops and teaching talks, I want to know, what am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do later today to make this happen in my classes? Sometimes when we get that 10,000 foot, abstract perspective that doesn't really relate, doesn't work as well for me. So my strategy is often to be as pragmatic and specific and concrete as I can. And I think I've got 10 ways to do this. And I think when we do this, we're going to better inform and inspire our students. Now, a lot of these, and this is how I've kind of tailored these recommendations, are going to work for anyone at any level and in any discipline. So it's not going to be something that only works for psychological sciences or something that only works for social sciences and humanities. I think this is something that works for anyone doing anything, teaching at any level. First of these, super simple. Use second person language in your syllabus. What this means is you're going to say things like, you will. So you're going to tell your students, you will do this, you will learn this, you will demonstrate this, rather than students will. And there's actually been some data that show that when you put you will, students then think about themselves as being a student in that class. They think about themselves engaging in those course activities, completing those assignments, gaining that knowledge and those skills. So these are things that are helping our students just think about themselves more autonomously and providing a little self-efficacy for them. So real simple, just do it. Second, also real simple, we're going to offer student hours rather than office hours. Office hours is often what this has typically been called. I got my PhD in 2001. This is a long time ago. We had office hours. And this was time your students could stop by and ask questions about the course, ask about grades, whatever that happened to be. The issue is office hours is a vague term that students don't often understand. I had students once actually tell me that they didn't come to my office hours because they thought that's the time I was in my office doing my research and they shouldn't bother me, which is exactly the opposite of what it should be. Now, I was not smart enough to think of calling it student hours. People in the literature have done this and the studies on this, but student hours is very, very specific and clear that that is time for students. So this is something you're going to put on your syllabus. You're going to call it student hours. You're going to explain what they are, and you're going to repeatedly over the course of the semester remind your students that you have student hours for them. Also, another thing that I recommend here is also on your syllabus put and also available by appointment, because invariably you're going to have students who can't make your student hours. So those will be convenient for you, might not be convenient for them. So let them know that you're also available by appointment and let them know how to set that up with you. The next one, which is a huge part of my teaching philosophy, is that I offer opportunities, and I recommend you do this too, rather than mandating requirements. So what happens in my class, I call this choice to learn in my classes. It's kind of to instill intrinsic motivation, responsibility, and autonomy to students, is let's say you have the opportunity to take a test next week. Now, if they take that opportunity, they have an opportunity to earn up to this many points. If they forfeit that opportunity, choose not to take it, then they will not earn any of those available points. So what happens is I provide opportunities over the course of the semester for my students to earn points. If they take those opportunities, they potentially earn some points. If they decline those opportunities, they won't earn those points. And now the grade is up to them. So what happens is rather than me telling you, you have to read chapter 2, I'll say, I recommend you read chapter 2 because that will help you on the exam opportunity that we have next week. And what this phrasing does is puts me in the position to facilitate and support my students' learning and success rather than being the authoritarian figure telling them to do stuff. Because I want them to be adults and make the choice to do these things if they want to and if it's consistent with their goals. I want them to do it for themselves, not for me. And the language of my syllabus will reflect that. The next thing, and I've seen syllabi grow in length over the course of my career. I've had colleagues in some programs tell me that their syllabi are in the 35 to 40 page range. And this is just, that's not a syllabus anymore. That's a textbook, right? That's really what that has become. So I want us to provide information, but I want us not to overwhelm our students. So we're going to provide a fair overview. I'm going to recommend we are not comprehensive. I'm going to recommend that we try not to intimidate our students with the jargon or the severity of the things coming up. For instance, if I talk to my students in my class about what they're going to do in the final project, without them having learned any of that knowledge or any of those skills, they're going to be like, how am I going to do that? There's no way I can do that. And you know what? At the beginning of the semester, you can't. But 4 months from now, that'll be something realistic. So I think letting them know this is coming up, it's going to account for this many points, and giving a sentence or two description of what that might look like without trying to intimidate them and let them know, hey, this is going to be something that's going to be astronomical from this lens that you have right now. Instead, use what I call and what others call just-in-time learning. Tell them what they need to know now, and then give them the later information just in time for them to use it. So I'm going to recommend you do not make all of your assignments available comprehensively early in the semester because I don't know what those mean yet. So let them know it's coming up, but when it's time for you to actually assign it and then to work on it, just in time, provide them the detail that they will need. So provide a good overview and language that they can understand on the syllabus. Don't provide all of the information. Next, I'm going to recommend that you abbreviate the mandatory policies. So the mandatory syllabus statements that we have on there, those are university policy. And in reality, those apply to students and your class, whether or not they're on your syllabus. So these are university policies. We have very, very long legal sounding mandatory policies. And I'm going to say instead, maybe consider using the available briefer statements. If you go to the mandatory syllabus policy page, and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you will see this language. You almost miss it because it's literally the fine print. It says this PDF, and there's actually a hyperlink on PDF that you can barely see that says provides the short version of the syllabi statements with links and QR codes directing students to the full statements. Now, to be honest, the only reason I'm aware of these is because I wrote them. So what happens is if you go there, what will happen if you click that PDF? It will take you, for instance, these are just a couple of examples of a very, very manageable statement that gives the student what I think they need on your syllabus with a link to the full policy if they need to ever enact it in more detail. So I want you to think about what you're putting on your syllabus. Now, we'll say I include some full policies on my syllabus as well. The mental health policy, the diversity policy, those I include those full policies and I go over them because I want them to stand out and to be something that my students hear me talk about again and again over the course of the semester. But I'll recommend for a lot of the ones that are maybe a little bit more just university policy that you're putting in there just to kind of be legal, these have been approved by our faculty senate and our office of the provost as a shorter statement that can be substituted for those full policies. So I'm going to recommend that you check those out. I'm also going to recommend that you make the SLOs in your course engaging. SLO stands for student learning outcome. These are the things your students are going to learn over the course of the semester. And a lot of times these are hidden in jargon. I've already told you, don't, bog your syllabi down with jargon. These are hidden in jargon. They don't make sense to students at that point, and they're not 100% sure what any of that means. So describe the knowledge in a way that your students will want to learn it. Think about how you're going to market this class, frame this class to your consumer. So they're saying, you know what, I want to stay in this class. This class seems amazing. So describe those SLOs in ways that students will want to learn what you're teaching, and they're going to want to develop the skills that they're going to acquire in your class. So make this sound like a reasonable and realistic pitch to your students about a course they want to stay in. Relatedly, we're going to foreshadow the amazing content in our class. We're going to consider the phrasing. We're going to consider using intriguing questions. We're not just going to put the term itself, but maybe instead of saying development in teaching a psychology class, maybe you talk about the amazing ways that humans develop over the lifespan. Maybe that becomes your title instead. Maybe instead of research methods, the ways in which we acquire knowledge in psychology. Use these terms that students say, hey, I want to know that, rather than just this kind of generic title. Also be aware that when your students are coming in a class, they've probably read the catalog description. Catalog descriptions are not written to be comprehensive, and they're actually not written to be intriguing. So know that coming in, your students might not actually know the amazing content. Put it on your syllabus. Then make the assessments engaging. We're going to teach information, our students are going to learn information, but then they're going to demonstrate that learning. They're going to do so on assessments and assignments. So make these engaging, make these cool, make these things that your students are looking forward to doing and you're looking forward to grading. So consider doing things like calling cool names. Classes often have missions. So rather than assignment, I'm saying you're going to do this mission. It's like, oh, that sounds exciting. I want to do that mission. So think about how it is you're going to phrase these in ways. And then in your assignments, allow for creativity, allow for application, and allow for personalization to the extent that you can. I am aware that I said, I want these to be, generalizable to all classes, all disciplines, all levels. Your class might not allow for this. I get that. You might have a really big class, it's an intro class, and you got multiple choice exams and things, and that's what you got to do. I get that. But to the extent that you can, allow for creativity, application, and personalization, and use empathy in creating your assignments. I'm not going to go into too much more detail on this today. However, we do have a hyperlink, and you can check out some of my brief comments about that. I then want you to think about providing opportunities for student choice and empowerment. Our information in our classes, for the most part, is really just a vehicle to promote our students' personal and professional development. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide opportunities for our students to develop. So to the extent that you can, allow choice among assignments. Maybe you can do this one or that one. Maybe you're going to complete 3 of those assignments, but they get 4 options. And what that does actually reduces your amount of grading in each grading point. So allow for choice among assignments, choice among topics, choice among forms of completion. In my classes, sometimes I'll give the opportunity to write a small paper or do a short presentation, and they can pick the one that they would prefer. So do things that are much more asset focused rather than deficit focused. So focusing what students can do, not what they can't, when you're setting up your classes. Then we're going to demonstrate on our syllabus our commitment to student learning and success. This should be the foundation of our teaching philosophies. Athena has entered the chat here. This is the cat that likes me. Apollo doesn't like me, but Athena likes me, so she can visit. So we're going to demonstrate our commitment to student learning and success. One of the ways we're going to do this was in empathetic syllabus statements. So we're going to potentially, and I know Andy referenced this a little bit before, and I'll let you kind of click the video link to see more specific thoughts on this. But we're going to set statements about attendance, about late policy, about missing work, all of those sorts of things that are going to be consistent with us being good humans and us realizing that life sometimes does happen. My colleague Andy Thompson at Student Support and Accountability yesterday talked about this at New Faculty Orientation, and talking about, kind of that general rule in working with students is let's be good humans. Have policies that show your students that you are a good human. Also, set up your course structure and policies accordingly. For instance, consider maybe having mental health days. Now, this might be a day that is canceled for your class, and they're going to focus on doing some self-care or some catch-up in your class or those kind of things. One of the things this semester, we have a Wildcat Pause Day in October, where all classes on a Friday are canceled, so students can do those sorts of things. But you might instead say, I'm not going to cancel class, but I'm going to give every student the opportunity to decide what day is going to be their mental health day. So every student's going to have one excused absence for whatever reason they want, and that'll be something that they can decide when they most need it. You might also allow for wildcard submissions. For instance, in my classes, I'll often have weekly reflections, but my students can spend 2 wildcards. So twice a semester, they can submit just the 2 words that just say wildcard, and that means they're going to get credit for that reflection that week without having to actually submit it. I think doing that twice in a 15-week semester is not a big deal for me. It actually reduces my grading just a little bit, so it's helpful for me in that regard as well. But it lets my students know I understand sometimes life happens, and even though that assignment might not be something that's real big or real effortful, sometimes just getting that 15, 20, half hour back might be something that changes the demeanor of your week. Maybe think about allowing that to happen. Now, you're going to bring this syllabus to your first day of class, but your first day is not just syllabus day. This is something I say a lot. You heard me say this yesterday for your new faculty orientation. First day is not just syllabus day. They can read. Your students can read. If you're just going to read your syllabus to them and dismiss them 20 minutes into a 75-minute class, that is a waste of your time and a waste of theirs. So I'm going to recommend that we treat that first day with the goal to inspire our students to come back for the second day, the third day, the fourth day, all of those sorts of things. I kind of see the syllabus as kind of an informed consent document in some ways, but it's not the only thing that we do on my first day. So I'm going to tell you 5 things that I think I want you all to do on your first day, and I do these on mine. Number 1, I'm going to share my interests and my experiences. I'm going to tell them why I'm in the field that I'm in. I'm going to tell them the experiences that led me to teaching this course. I might talk a little bit about my personal and professional background. I might talk a little bit about my family. I can introduce myself as a person. This is going to show that authenticity, potentially that caring, maybe that expertise and preparation, all those aspects of peace. And then when I'm doing this, I'm going to be super engaged. So I've hit all 5 components in peace in terms of sharing my interests and my experiences with my class. Sorry, I got to get to my button through my cat. Here we go. Next, we're going to do something related to the course content. Your students should learn something on the first day. They should learn something about your topic and your course on that first day. And ideally, this can be something they wanted to learn, something that's interesting. I think of the things that I include in my class, I include what is important and what is interesting. Those are the 2 things, what is important and what is interesting. So they're going to do important, interesting stuff on that first day, even a little bit. They do something related to course content and start their learning on that first day. Next, do something to build classroom community. They should connect to each other. They should connect to you. You should connect to them. They should connect to the content. Do something to build a community of learners. These might be a get to know you kind of thing. By the way, I'm not a huge fan of random get to know you things. I'm a huge fan of get to know you things that are related to course content. So it might be something like, what is a question you have about psychology that you share? What is the interest that brought you to this class? What is your goal at the end of the class? And then share that out with groups. So I'm going to do something related to my course content rather than what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite movie? That's not something that is as interesting to me, but you do you. And it might come from that, is provide opportunities for students to ask questions. When students ask questions and we take those seriously and we respond, it shows that we care about their perspective, we care about their learning, and we care about them as people. So allow your students the opportunity to ask questions. In my general psychology class, I have 200 students. On the first day, what I have them do is I get into small groups of 2 or 3, and they submit a question via Qualtrics to me. And then I answer every single question on the second day of class. Now, those 200 students can, in those small groups, usually produce about 60 to 70 questions. And what happens, I answer them all on that second day of class to show them that I'm really going to take seriously the questions that they answer. So provide students those opportunities. So not just, do you have any questions about the syllabus? And by the way, do you have questions is not the phrasing that I prefer. I prefer, what are your questions? Because that makes it normative that you will have some. Oftentimes what people do is they'll say, do you have any questions? They will be looking away from the students, back at their slideshows. We'll wait less than 2 seconds, say okay, and go to the next thing. I recommend waiting at least 8 seconds, which is a long time. We'll actually see how long 8 seconds is right now. That was 8 seconds. And I picked this up from the AQ teacher training program a couple of years ago. This is a professional development opportunity that we had here at K-State a few years ago. 8 seconds. It gives your students time to collect their thoughts, think about their phrasing, and also manage some of that social anxiety about having to raise their hand and speak in class. So let your students have the opportunity to ask questions. Let them ask their questions in writing. Let them ask their questions over email so that it reduces some of that social anxiety speaking in class. This is something I absolutely recommend. And then the fifth thing, and we're going to do this multiple times over that first day, is we're going to demonstrate gratitude. When students come to class, I'm going to say, thank you so much for enrolling in this class. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for the questions that you asked me. Thank you so much for coming back on Thursday if you come back on Thursday. I'm going to thank my students. I'm going to mean it every single time. This is something that's been part of my teaching for a while. I've had a lot of students tell me they've never had instructors thank them. Well, let's change that. Let's be the instructors that thank them and mean it. So in conclusion, we're going to create syllabi that inform and inspire our students. We're going to infuse peace not only into our syllabi, but on our first days of class and every day thereafter. And when we do this, this is going to create positive experiences for ourselves and for our students. And using all that, now you're going to go ready and you're going to rock that first day. So I'm going to open up the floor now for any questions that you might have. I will go here, because if any of you want to contact me later, here is my email, so you can check that out. I'll also provide a little bit of plug that Engage the Sage thing down there. We have a YouTube channel on teaching techniques, recommendations, those kind of things. We post a lot of these in our TLC stuff, but you can check that out if you have any kind of questions. A lot of those hyperlinks that I had in there are going to take you to videos in our Engage the Sage channel. But I'm going to stop my share right now and address any questions that you all might have. And I want to thank you for all of your attention and attendance this morning. Yes, Jennifer.
So when we're rewriting our course level objectives or student level objectives, however we want to list them, most of us were taught Bloom's taxonomy and, we've got to use the layers and blah, blah, blah. But those are the words that are not super understandable by our students. Can we pitch that? Because that kind of
I think that for me,
everything, so
I do use Bloom's taxonomy in my language, but what I do is I change what follows that. So I might say, apply is one of the higher levels, right? Or create is one of the higher levels. So I might say, create an intervention to make society more inclusive, rather than say, apply theories of social psychology to social issues. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick language following the Bloom's verb to get closer to intriguing content. That's what I would recommend that we do. But for those of you familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, and for those of you who aren't, it starts real low, like identify and list and regurgitate. That's not exactly what it says, but in essence what it says. And then later it's much higher things like create, compare, contrast, analyze, those sorts of things. So I recommend using those, but make sure the content that they're going to be either listing or creating is going to be interesting to them. That's my recommendation.
I keep a chart of Bloom's taxonomy verbs next to my desk so that when I'm preparing any kind of class content, preparing syllabi, that I can just look right there, what are the things that I want to do? Oh, okay, yeah, I want them to evaluate what they're doing here, or that can just help a lot with that when I'm not feeling the creative juices flowing. A lot of times just looking at those verbs really helps me to be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is the kind of thing that I want them to do today.
And I do want to reiterate a comment that my colleague Trina made in her presentation earlier this morning. When we're using that SLO language and those Bloom's language, making them measurable is going to be easier. So I'm not a huge fan of using know or understand, because that's a little bit hard to do, but describe is one I like, So it's kind of thinking about how it is I'm going to assess it, and then using a verb that leads to assessment, I think is something that I like. And I'll remind everybody who might be watching later, because this is going to be posted for asynchronous viewing. If you have questions and don't have the opportunity to ask in real time, have my email there. Reach out and I'll be happy to answer your question over email. But in real time, does anyone have any other? Oh, I'm sorry. What other questions do we have?
You know, I will say,
Yes.
Don, one thing that I do to take that just a little bit further is that
Sure.
particularly like first day, but all throughout the semester as well, sometimes I'll put students in groups and say, okay, I want you to come up with a list of 5 questions related to this content, what 5 questions about the course, 5 questions that have to be, it can be about me, can be about what we're going to be doing this semester. And so kind of not like making them, like you're gonna have to come up with 5 questions. I don't care that you don't think you have 5 questions right now, but you're gonna come
Yeah,
up
I'm
with
gonna
five
give them the
questions.
opportunity, but the
Yeah.
expectation to do it. So
Other questions for Don?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
sure.
I'm designing a new course and a brand new teacher. And so I guess I'm curious if you have any sort of advice on like how prepared to be, how designed should my modules be, and like how far ahead of time should I have them made?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. I would recommend kind of coming into the start of the semester. And by the way, we vary in our response to this. I know that Trent is going to give you a different answer than I'm about to give. If you had your first 2 modules done, I'm going to be happy. I think it's one of the things that for me, it's getting those student learning outcomes successfully completed is important. And sometimes, especially when I teach a new class, I can't really determine how quickly they're going to be able to learn. And a lot of times when information scaffolds, if we didn't learn objective 1, we can't go to objective 2. So I found that when I've tried to be really far ahead, I often am always revising. So for me, I try to be maybe a week ahead and then I adjust on the fly as I go through. Now, what I do is in my schedule, I build in this is going to be my revision time because I know my plan is going to have to change. And I have a disclaimer on my syllabus on my schedule that this is a good faith effort, but there's a possibility that topics may go longer or shorter than I anticipate, and I will update as needed. What I do try to do is try to make sure my exams stay on the same day. So if I'm teaching a seminar class that doesn't have exams, it's really not that big an issue, but I try to make sure my exams stay on the same date, but it might not cover the exact content I was expecting it to cover. So short answer, if I'm a week ahead, I'm feeling good. Starting the semester, if I have the first 2 modules worked out, I'm feeling good. I wouldn't put a lot of pressure on myself to have 15 weeks mapped out before I've even met my students.
Yeah. I go with having like a general plan of like these are the things
Yes.
that I want to make sure, like these are my things that I must cover, these are the things that I would like to cover, kind of have a general plan. And I also recommend building in kind of what Don was saying, building in some like working class days, which
Yeah.
for me are just like if there are things that the students seem to not understand, and if I feel like the students are really on board and that they don't need like extra, if they've been rock stars throughout the semester, then sometimes I'll use that as like a bonus day to like show them something really exciting that I wasn't planning to have in the class, but I think is really cool. Or maybe I'll take them to the library to like check out some of the resources there. So giving yourself some padding. This is something that I definitely didn't do when I started teaching, and it always made for really stressful semesters for me. I've learned since then that having some built-in like little pads can really help to be able to make the course run smoother. I also front load my classes. And so I have a lot more at the beginning, and then at the end of the course, it's more about like bringing ideas together, making connections, thinking about how it applies to the real world. I find that that also helps a lot because at the end of the semester, I'm burned out, my students are burned out. And so when they're nice and fresh at the beginning of the semester, that's when I give them more work.
I'm gonna say that Andy's perspective on that is right on. The beginning of the semester, everyone is energetic, everyone is on good behavior. That's where I'll often handle some of the most foundational and difficult topics. End of the semester, I'll often kind of backload with some really cool stuff. So it's stuff I'm looking forward to, stuff I can foreshadow for them. So not just kind of the, having those, reflections on it, but just saving some of the coolest stuff. For instance, when I teach general psychology, I'm actually a social psychologist. I cover social psychology in the last week of the course because I'm like, at the end, that's my expertise. That's what I devoted my career to. I can't wait for that. So when I come in that last week in December, it's cold outside, everyone's overwhelmed. That's when I'm like, I couldn't wait to get here. So doing some of those kind of things to kind of provide a good experience for yourself as well, I think is going to be something part of my course planning. And to be clear, I do have 15 weeks of topics laid out on my syllabus in that first day. I just don't know what that actually means yet until I get to them.
I also feel like Andy once gave really good advice, and that is we should write our syllabi when we're most stressed in the semester so we could be realistic for what's going to actually happen. And that has stuck with me for a very long time. Like, yeah, when I'm feeling at my worst, how much do I actually want to be packing into that class and grading?
Yeah, usually towards the end of the semester is when I kind of map out what I want to do with the course the next time I teach it, because one, that's when it's all fresh in my mind of like, oh, okay, these are the things that worked, these didn't. I might want to add this, I might want to cut this. And also at that point in the semester, I'm like, I do not want to do all of this. I want to do like a part of this. So
what other questions y'all have? Yes, sir.
So I have a question because I have historically put everything in my syllabus. And today I'm definitely learning not to do that, but I'm always curious. And I'm also teaching an intro to honors class. So it might be a particular subset of student about those students who want to plan their semesters out and want to know what's happening every week of the semester. Or they're like, I know I've got to do this on this week. And they're like, they might be student athletes and they're like, I've got to be gone this week. What am I going to do? How do you balance that?
I would list the things without the details. I actually, this past semester, for the first time ever, I kind of ran into a detail where there's a student wanted to do all their work in the first couple of weeks. So what happened is I don't provide a ton of detail. They went off the little detail that I had and then did not do the assignments very well because number one, they didn't have the learning yet. But number two, I didn't put all the parameters of the assignment in the syllabus. And this was the situation got pretty bad with the student. And now I have a policy on my syllabi that says, do not complete assignments until they've been officially assigned. So I want students to know what's up, but there's a point you can't do them yet. No matter how ambitious you are, you haven't learned the content. So I would list them out, but I would not provide the details to prevent students from being able to do that. And like I said, I'm adding in that policy. Don't do it until I tell you you can do it.
yeah, I essentially do the same thing. I have my modules, my weekly modules that had like, so the students see that there's content coming up. They have the general calendar that has like the big dates so that if they know they're going to be gone this week, they can talk to me and be like, oh, I see that I'm going to be missing this. But yeah, then I let them know like the expectation is that you're doing these things in order because that is the way that we learn them. And this is the way that we're learning together. So yeah, I second what Don has said.
So other questions? All right. Well, I want to end by saying two things. Number one, if you have questions later, reach out. One of my favorite things to do as part of my role at the TLC is to talk to people out there teaching. So if you have questions later, want to meet, want to shoot ideas by me, brainstorm, whatever, I'm happy to do that. Love doing that. It's awesome. Second thing is you're going to rock this. This is going to be awesome. As we kind of talked about at the beginning, you might be apprehensive now. I am completely unprepared for the semester coming up next week, but I'm going to get there. So are you. It's going to be awesome. Our classes are going to rock. Our students are going to learn so many cool things. And at the end of December, we're going to be all proud of ourselves and our students. So thank you so much for being here this morning. Reach out again if you need to, and happy teaching next week.
Thanks, guys.